Hi! So welcome back to Bryan Danielson's AEW run, where we're going through every single match of Bryan's AEW catalogue. And today we're on match number 22, which is a return to a pay-per-view, and the match we've been building for a few weeks now. We have AEW Revolution 2022. Bryan Danielson finally faces Jon Moxley 1v1 due to Jon Moxley not accepting Bryan's offer to team until he's bled with him first. This is obviously leading to the formation of a certain faction that I consider one of the greatest factions of all time. And this match is highly built up. So, before we get into it, I will just say the story going into it's one of my favourites, so I've got bias. But I've surprisingly never seen this match before, so it is one of the first times I've actually sat down and watched this match. And this would be one of the first times... No, it wouldn't, that's a lie. I was going to say it was one of the first times Bryan's faced Moxley. It is an AEW, but not in his career, because obviously Indies and WWE. But either way, let's get into it. So the match opens up, and instantly the crowd are up for it, both for guys. They're definitely more favouring Bryan, I think, but then Moxley's entrance, like, it's very weird. I feel like they do favour Bryan in this. But as a match, I mean, Moxley's always going to be over. Moxley's one of the best ever, and Bryan is, in my opinion, the best ever. So it's going to be... The crowd was kind of flat for it, I will say, during the match. I thought the crowd could have been a bit more amped, but it's a slow, technical bout that doesn't really pick up in terms of, like, you know, grabbing an audience until the last 5, 10 maybe. So you can't really blame it on the match. But I thought the match, beginning to end, was excellent. I do. I have obviously got bias with the two wrestlers in it, but I think it starts up with some very much, obviously, technical-based wrestling, which is obviously Bryan's forte. But throughout the match, it's very apparent that Bryan's trying harder, in the sense of Bryan knows he has to put twice the effort into every strike he does because of Moxley's stature. Just so, because if Moxley hits him once, it's going to hurt much as Bryan hits him twice. I love that. Bryan, for the entire match, is on top. He truly is. He's on top in terms of Bryan's controlling it. Bryan gets a lot of the kicks Bryan delivers to Moxley's stomach genuinely look vicious. It's incredible. It's like, the way Moxley sells it, I don't know if it's a sell or just genuine pain. It's that good. And what I love about these two guys in this specific match, it really showcases two things. One, how similar they are. It's like, when you hear Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley, obviously it's a bit different for us now in modern day, because you're like, yeah, they've been in a faction together, obviously, and it's like, but at this point, there probably wasn't a lot of similarities between the two, but looking at this match, it's like, they're both very, very driven, very, you know, vicious, frankly, and very ruthless in terms of how they wrestle and strike. It's brilliant. And yeah, they're still different in terms of how they wrestle, but they very, very rarely would the guys go easy. It's great. I love that Bryan, the start of the match, even they put it over on commentary, is usually looking a bit cocky, smiling. He doesn't look like this with Moxley. He doesn't take his eyes off. Not as serious, but he's definitely taking him more serious than he does. Feels like Bryan feels like this is a legit challenge for him, which is great. And even then, throughout the match, Bryan gets the best of Moxley, doing some technical grabs, you know, throwing him behind his back, and starts doing the press up. I love this shit, what happens early on, because it's similar to how he handles the Hangman match at the start, and it feels like it could have went that way. Because Bryan gets through Moxley, and then he goes out the ropes to hang like that through the rope, and that's what he does to Hangman, continuously aggravating Hangman to get Hangman to fall into his trap. Moxley just gets him back. Bryan just gets back in the ring. Moxley looks at him and just slaps that shit out of him and basically goes, "Don't do that shit with me." And I'm like, oh, that's it. From that point, I was hooked, because I was like, this is different. And it really builds into that. Bryan doing the star jumps, but then Moxley hits him back and then starts doing it. Bryan, like, showing he can't wrestle Moxley like he's wrestled Hangman, like he's wrestled anyone before, frankly. And I love that. I love that they really put that over during the match. I think Moxley... Again, Moxley does everything great. We all know this. Moxley's entire his selling, his striking, everything about what Jon Moxley does is perfected. And you can never deny that, even back then, before, frankly, his modern peak, frankly. And then Bryan's mainly on top. The psycho knees he does in this one are incredible. And then you've also got, you know, again, the basic just kicks. The chops. The chops Bryan delivers are some of the best chops I've seen him do, which are great. And what I do love about this is they both show that they clearly want to make this as realistic. There's a point in the match where Bryan's just full on punching Jon Moxley in the face. There's no selling to it. He is just punching him in the face, and I fucking love that. I think everything about this, it shows that it's not as the match people thought it'd be. And that's what I think that kind of drags it down in terms of people's recognition of it. It's in a stacked pay-per-view, but people don't... Everyone thought this match, probably going into it, was especially with the build, was going to be pure, insane speed, you know, this incredibly intense match in terms of, you know, high stakes and stuff. It's not. It's a very brutal, gritty match that takes its time to build into that gritty nature. Like, Moxley and Bryan don't get blade jobs until about 10-15 minutes in. So I think that's what benefits from it. I like the fact that they both don't hold back. Like, again, I like the way that Moxley's continuously, like, there's a point where Bryan's kicking Moxley in the corner, and Moxley goes, come on, more! And it's like, Jesus, like, Moxley's been through hell at this point, and Bryan's, like, still beside himself, like, really? And he just won't give in, though. And then, like, even Bryan's going when he puts Moxley in the corner, is that enough, Mox? Do you like that? Like, you know, like, they're trying to get under each other's skin, because they're both top level wrestlers, some of the best ever. At this point, they both believe they're more hardcore than the other, which is insane. I love how they betray him. I think Moxley here looks great, as always. Moxley they really put over his win the combat boot, so anytime he stomps Bryan, it does hurt, obviously double amount. But even with the combat boot, that adds an extra edge. I love it. I love everything about it. I think the main things I like to talk about is the headbutts. There's a big headbutt. Bryan goes for a diving headbutt. Moxley dodges it. But then this is where the blade job comes in. Bryan somehow throws Moxley outside. They both start whacking each other, and they start doing headbutts. And then Moxley splits open like hell. And then Bryan's like split open, but it starts, you know, oozing a bit more. That's when the crowd get into it, and that's when the match kind of kicks into a second gear. And I like that. I think but it still doesn't lose that core of a technical wrestling bout, which I really liked. I like how Bryan was still reversing. So Moxley, there's a point where Moxley gets him in the Coquina Clutch. That's Joe's name for it, but, you know, he gets him in the Bulldog Choke or whatever. And Bryan reverses it, and it's like, Jesus, it just shows how technically great Bryan is. I thought Bryan had cradle here. He doesn't cradle. But it's very much a striking bout that has technical wrestling by Bryan, because, again, he's mainly controlling the show. And the finish kind of dictates that. I like it. I'll talk about the finish in a minute. But there's, again, some other moves where, like, the both of them are getting more into it. They're both going head to head. There's a point where they're both on the floor and they're both kicking each other like fuck towards the end. It's brilliant. Brilliantly brutal. That's exactly the way that I describe it. Brilliantly brutal. It really is. This, for me, is a type of wrestling match that, it's going to sound snobby. If you're into wrestling, and it's a true, and, like, if you're into wrestling, and, frankly, if you're a fan of Bryan and the style of if you consider Bryan the greatest wrestler ever, like I do, or, you know, top 3, you really appreciate Bryan Danielson's greatness, you'll love this match. But if you don't, you're gonna think it's a bit let down. You're gonna think it's like an okay match, which it's still good, but I think you gotta have this appreciation and understanding of technical wrestling, and that is a hard hill to climb, and it's a hard hill to pass. Understandable, but especially with Moxley, with these death matches, especially from modern conception, you think a lot of, you know, Moxley, the fork and shit like that. No, it's very just a fight. It is just a fight. The way I describe Bryan and Moxley's match here is Moxley is like a damn crocodile, where Bryan's just continuously trying to, like, you know that crocodile teeth game where you and the crocodile slams and people put spikes on it for some fucking reason. That's what it feels like, where Bryan's continuously doing that, but anytime Moxley gets in there, it's gonna do Bryan damage, and I love how they portrayed that. It's not a David versus Goliath, because it is more gritty, it's more brutal, it's very, like I said, punching each other in the face, the blood on the knuckles. Again, when the blade job gets into it, the imagery is fantastic. The finish, I love. The finish, I adore. So, towards the end of the match, Bryan goes to kick Moxley's head in. And then Bryan, I don't know how they reverse it, I forget. But then Moxley gets it, and Moxley starts kicking Bryan's head in first. And it's like, shit, especially with the combat boots on. And then Moxley at just one point just starts kicking, like, because Bryan does the kick to the back of the back. And then Moxley does it to the back of Bryan's head. It's like, Jesus, fuck. Like, this is just the way, it's like they're both trying to one-up each other. It's great. I did not mean to do that hand gesture. But it's brilliant. And then, one thing I love, British, is, like, it feels rewarding if you're a fan of Bryan. That's what feels good about it, because you're watching all these moves. And I love how Bryan's the smartest and most technical wrestler, but the finish kind of flips that on the head. It's brilliant. Then Bryan has the move where, like, if he has you forward, he'll pull the arms down, basically damaging the arm. And then Bryan does that to Moxley, and then he gets him in the choke. And then they're trying to go forward, and they start, you know, scurrying on the ground. Choke Bryan gets Moxley in at one point, by the way, where Moxley's head goes fucking purple, is incredible. The chokes they give each other towards the end are incredible, because they both start fading. It's great. The resilience from Bryan at that point is obviously basic, but it's just perfected, yet again, what you expect from Bryan. And then towards the end, the finish specifically, Bryan's got Moxley in a choke, and Moxley goes to the ropes, gets his foot on the ropes, flips Bryan over, gets the shoulders down, and gets Moxley's first win as Jon Moxley over Bryan Danielson. Huge moment. Bryan's pissed. Bryan does not like it. Bryan's like, what the fuck? And he goes up to Bryce and he starts pushing Bryce. Bryce starts pushing him back. And then he goes up to Moxley. Moxley's getting his hand raised, like kind of rubbing it in. And he just starts attacking Moxley. They both start brawling. Then the security run out. And this is where a big moment happens. Without like any music. Kind of like Moxley's debut, ironically. William Regal comes out. And now if you don't know about William Regal is one very closely tied to Bryan, to the point of a father figure-esque figure, and also just, you know, throughout his career, but also very closely to Moxley. Not as close as Bryan, but definitely close to Moxley, where like him and Moxley got a lot of immense respect for each other. And obviously this way, as you could imagine, the faction is born, the Blackpool Combat Club, one of the best factions in all of wrestling history, in my opinion. And then Regal comes out, he's pissed, he looks pissed, and he goes up to the pair, and what are you doing? Drags Moxley off Bryan, and then he's like fronting Moxley essentially, and Moxley's trying to go for Bryan, and then Moxley slaps him. He slaps Moxley, and Moxley kind of is restrained. He's like, I'm not going to attack you out of restraint and respect. I love that angle from Moxley. That really fits him. And then I love Bryan at this point. Bryan's such a little shithead because Bryan's laughing his head off because he knows Regal loves him. And then he comes up and Bryan's like laughing, and then Bryan's got his hands out for a hug, and Regal just slaps him, and Bryan looks devastated. I love it. He's like that for like a solid like minute. It's incredible. And then Regal's pissed at the pair of them, going, you sold out the show, shake hands. And he gets the pair of them dragged in, and they shake hands, but there's clearly animosity, and they storm off. I love that angle. I love everything about it. It's nice to see Regal as this type of role. Obviously, celebrates coming in. The pop for Regal's great. Regal's very much a wrestler AEW fans are going to love. And obviously, you know, from WWE NXT, he had a good rep. You know what I mean? And everything about with the relationship with Bryan and Moxley, it worked. It made sense, which was great. Everything about it. But that is the end of the match. That is the end of the entire, well, the Moxley and Bryan early feud. Because, you know, I'm not even going to talk about that yet. But point is, this is the start of where the BCC is born. And this is a very interesting time for Bryan and AEW as a whole. So, yeah, that's like the thoughts of match, just like, you know, briefly is, I think the match is a great, like, slow, weighty, brutal match. It's brilliant. Again, it's brilliantly brutal. And I love that from it. I think it works for Bryan. I think it works with Moxley. I like that Bryan was on top for a lot of it. I feel like that's what kind of makes people not, you know, love it as much. The crowd, especially, is they could have had Moxley be a bit more involved, but it kind of works because once Moxley gets pissed, Moxley's looking to get pushed, and when Moxley does get pushed, you know, it does act. It's a great match. It really is a great match. And again, like I said, if you appreciate technical wrestling, the likes of Bryan, the likes of Zack Sabre Jr., these type of people, you'll love it. You really will. And even if you're a fan of Moxley, you'll love it. It's a great match. It really is. It's just, I understand why people weren't pleased with it, because obviously it's not what they expected. But that's fine. That's the point of exploring this in a way. I think it's great. I really do. And it's interesting that they went this way with Bryan and Moxley. I do think that. I think it is a very interesting way. But I enjoyed that. I enjoyed it a lot. I didn't think it would be this way going into it. I didn't. But the finish, the moves, the brutality of making Bryan highlighted as this brutal figure yet again shows why I love AEW and shows why I love Bryan and AEW specifically. And again, Moxley, what else can you say about the guy? Jesus wept. What a fucking wrestler. Even everyone's giving him his flowers now, as they should. Even back then, he's the ace. He truly is the ace. And it's a great match. It's worth the hype to me, but I understand why it isn't. I think it's kind of underrated. I don't think people talk about this match as much as they should. I think it's a great show for both wrestlers. I just think it's the story at the time with how much they were building Bryan and Moxley. It kind of disappointed a few people, so maybe that's why. But maybe with time removed, I think it's a great match. For the first time I've ever watched it and just what I was expecting going into it, I fully enjoyed it. I felt like it delivered, but I get if people said they never. I think it's a classic. I really do. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Bryan vs. Moxley at AEW Revolution 2022. I think it's a great match, like I said. What do you think? Have you ever seen it? What do you think of this entire little run so far? What do you think of the Blackpool Combat Club? Because I think it's a very great faction. I don't think a lot of people talk about it in historic sense as they should. And yeah, onwards and upwards for the Bryan run coverage. But let me know what you thought of this match and what you think of just everything so far.